Let me post this. This is link to.
um, activity is covering what you're supposed to do on Friday. So we did some discussion concerning the architecture of operating systems. But what we are looking at today is you are going to be installing from a VirtualBox, right? And one VirtualBox, not to say that VirtualBox is the only one, there's no VMware. There are many other systems that will allow one operating system to run inside another operating system. And we need to do this for this class so that you can practice and learn other systems in case you don't have them. Most people already have Windows. What you have is going to be, this is your normal operating system where you have your hardware, your OS kernel running, and processes are interacting. What you'll be doing is, when you install VirtualBox, you'll be getting sort of like a special program that will present virtual machines. So it means that it will pretend to sort of respond. It will say, oh, I have a hard drive, I have a processor, I have a screen, but they are not real. They are all just for software. So that when someone makes a call to maybe write to this, what it will do is it will intercept that call and process it. Maybe you could write to a file instead of to a disk. So that is what we'll be using a lot in this class, VirtualBox. So this is my VirtualBox, and as you can see, there are many operating systems that are in there. There are things like, I think this is Android. We do have Android in there. So this class will focus on CentOS and possibly Linux, at least for within VirtualBox. And when we get to Windows, we'll look at Windows 2012 or 2087. They are similar. If you are using one or the other, you shouldn't feel like your favorite OS wasn't used or it's useless. So you realize all the Linuxes do have some common cores, just as all the Windows do have some common parts. Going from Windows 7 to Windows 10, I don't think anyone said, oh, I can't use computers anymore. There's just some small, maybe some few differences, things that are added. You learn it, you move on. Right? So even if we use a slightly older version, please do not be annoyed. So this is all right. This is a virtual machine. In order to install the CentOS when you get it, you have to say you're going to make a new machine, and you can give it a name, right? And as you can see, there are all these versions of operating systems that are available, right? Including what? The type. So you can pick Windows and what type of Windows you are using. Sometimes, depending on the type of hardware you have, so let's say you have a 64-bit machine, you'll be able to run 64 and 32. But if you have a 32-bit machine, you may not be able to run 64. However, I think VMware is able to pull it off. So those who have 32-bit machines, will have to download VMware for you. You can get VMware. I think VMware is able to at least emulate it. So my first question to you is, why is it that when you're setting up a virtual machine, it needs to know the type of operating system and the type of architecture? Why does it need to know this before it creates a virtual machine? Why does this software need to know what type of OS is coming and what type of architecture to put it on? Whether 32 or 64 bit. Not exactly compatibility. Okay, maybe I didn't know. Slightly more. Why are very close to it?
Then I was thinking, you know how much resources
Okay, so it needs to know what type of resources to make available to what type of operating system. Windows is different from. So depending on which one you pick, what VirtualBox will do is it will think through and then make available those resources that that OS tends to use. Right. So you may go and buy maybe a type of laptop and they'll tell you, well, this only runs Mac, or this only runs Windows, or this runs Windows. So often being able to pick, first of all, gives it a hint as to what the type of operating system you're going to install. So I would advise you don't go and pick Windows. Well, maybe you could do it, but if you pick Windows and you install Linux, there could be some issues, right? Or if you pick Linux and you install Windows, there could be some issues. So as much as possible, you pick whatever is closest for you. So you can pick your Linux, and there are quite a few of them. CentOS is closest to Red Hat. Red Hat is the, should say, commercial version. So often there are commercial and then free versions. With the commercial, there will be some developers who are paid, dedicated, you subscribe, you pay, and they make sure that if there are updates, they get it to you. You don't have to worry about patching it yourself or maybe trying to figure out all the bugs and so on. So there are people who say we are supporting this professionally. You can call us for tech support. We'll talk to you. We'll get it sorted out. Right. So that's why there are several initiatives. So Red Hat is what we'll be using. Right. And you can give it a name if you want. There's the generic Linux as well. Let me see if they have. If you scroll down, if you are unsure which one, you can just scroll down and pick some generic. I mean, all of them will work. But if you pick, let's say, Red Hat, then we'll make sure that it will provide as much support to the OS as possible. Right. So you can pick your OS version. And you can also specify how much memory. Right. So the more memory you use, so that's how much memory I have. And I would advise you not to go beyond the red line. If you go into the red, the further you go, that means the virtual machine is going to use as much of your memory to support whoever is running. So if you say about 1 gig of RAM, that's fine. But if you realize that your virtual machine is very slow, maybe come back here and what? Give him some more memory. I hope you understand. Don't give it like 1 megabyte. So someone is like 4 megabytes. That's not going to work because consider that he's actually a real machine. He wants to run running on a laptop. So if you give him about 1 gig, that makes enough sense.
Should the memory be applying the operation system's minimum requirements, or could you?
So what I've been doing is sometimes I just do it since I'm not using it all the time, right? If I know I'm going to be working with a virtual machine for a long time, that's why I perform most of my tasks. I wouldn't mind shutting down a lot of things and make sure I have a lot of memory, just so I can get my work done quickly. Because when you're also waiting to click, it will cause some issues. And of course, he's right. If you read about the specific operating system, you may find out that there will be some listed minimum requirements. And if you don't meet those minimum requirements, what it will mean is that processors will be fighting for memory space. Right? So as much as possible, you can pick. But what I've realized is for the Linux machines, unless you're doing something graphical, they tend to be able to survive on little memory. But the more things you add, the more memory you have to make sure it's available. Oh, okay. So this note that it doesn't know. So when you start the say next, it picks a number. So it makes some assumptions. But you can move the slider up and down. It picks something like 700 and it picks a number for you. And then you can slide it up and down. You have the full control. It's just like if you buy a laptop, you can remove the memory from your laptop. But that doesn't mean that that's the right thing. So here it's almost like you have control of what? The hardware. You can provision as much memory as you want or as little memory as you want. But you have to apply some common sense to it. It will allow you to do it. I hope you understand. So it won't prevent you from doing something that is undesirable. Everything is editable, right? So recommended memory size is given, and I think depending on the OS that you pick. So let's see that if you go forward. Okay, so it seems for all the Linuxes it's using. Okay, let's pick a different one. Let's say Windows. Right. So depending on whichever OS you pick, that doesn't mean that's the best. Right. That's Windows Server. Right. Windows 10. Right. So depending on whichever one you pick in your comments, you can change it if you want, but it does recommend. Are people okay with this part, the memory? Okay, so the names are what are listed on the left-hand side here. So you should give it a name. So for example, I have different tasks, different projects I'm working on. So yes, so I have 64-bit, minimal. Some are named after whichever location you are working on. So you can name it's almost like making a folder or a name for it so that you can come back to it. Right. And this can isolate your work. So you can have one VirtualBox that you're using for OS, that maybe you can do anything you want with it. Maybe there's one that you're using for a project, you have installed specific things in there. There's one that you're using for a specific course that requires certain installation. So it's good to name your OSs. It's not the name of the OS, it's just the name of the instance. It's like the name of the database. Okay, so back to picking my Linux, Red Hat 64. All right, so the next is the hard disk. So all the virtual machines, they don't actually you don't have to put in a new hard disk to use a virtual machine. Right? So, for example, my virtual machines, let me see if I can find where their hard disks are located. Should be, okay, hard drives. So I have a folder that contains various, and you can see some of these are all hard disks. Right? So this is a 10.3 gigabyte hard disk. Right? So it needs to store the data. So what it's doing is that anytime the OS tells it go and store a file, there's a big file, it's almost like a block, a whole file, and you would then go in and what? Put the file in some location within this bigger file. It's just like if you have a zip file, within a zip file, when you extract it, you find multiple files. So what the VirtualBox does is it will have a virtual hard disk, which is an actual file on your machine that it uses to store data. So anytime it's told to go and store information, it comes and puts it what? Inside the virtual hard drive. Are people cool with the concept? Yeah. Right. So I can have as many hard drives. Well, of course, this is also dependent on how much hard drive space you have. If you have a large hard drive, you can have as many hard disks as you want. But the more space you use, so you realize some of these are smaller than the others. Like this one is about 5 gig, this one is 10 gig. So the more hard drive space you use, the more it would also use a file, make the file larger on your hard disk. Right. So there are two types of hard disks that are there. So it does say create a virtual. So for those who are installing the first time, it's good to create a virtual one. But if you've made one already, you can also go and pick. Right? So even if you install a virtual machine here, that file that you saw, that virtual hard drive, I can copy that, take it to another computer, and then when I'm setting it up, I'll say, I want to add, I already have a hard disk, and I can go and pick the file that represents that hard disk and plug it in, just like you would have done in physical life, like go in, unplug, but now it's all what? Software. It's a file. So instead of going to plug in a hard drive, you copy a file, and then you pick it, right? So, mhm. Yes, so it means that if I install, so let's say you are working for government and you are working with a virtual machine that contains, and it's not properly secured, doesn't have any password, not encrypted in any way, that contains all your government data. And someone copies that virtual hard drive, he more or less has your computer. Right. So that means that here, so realize that when I say use an existing, it's listing all the hard drives that are on the system. Right. So I can go and pick. So I can go and say I want to browse and go and pick one of the virtuals and run it. And you have that OS. So the operating system on your hard drive, it contains the OS kernel, your files, all those pieces are on the hard drive. Except that now it is putting it inside a file for you. You can, okay, so if you put it in the same one, on the same virtual hard, just don't think of it as something different. It's the same thing you do in real life. Just that now there are files for it. So if I take this virtual hard drive and I overwrite it with another one with an installation, I've wiped the hard drive and put something else on it. Right. So if you want to have another one, that's why I have several. So anytime I'm making another virtual machine, I just what? I create sorry, this back. Create a new virtual hard disk. So you can create one. But if you take an existing one, it means that either you're going to use it, or if you're not careful and you decide to install something else on it, it's almost like you took a real hard drive and you overwrote it. So you can't take another one. Just make sure that just decide if there's something on it or there's nothing on it. If there's something on it already, when you pick, you can just boot it. Right. So you can create a hard drive, and there are many formats. The most common VDI, well, these top three are the ones I tend to use. But depending on the company you are, well, or whatever organization you are working on, or what software you decide to interact with, you may want to decide, or maybe I don't want to use this version. As far as I know, VHD, VDI, and VMDT, so the first three seem to work between VMware and VirtualBox. They can sort of be interchangeable. Right? And these days, it's almost like the different types of zip files. You have zip, Docker. They have become so persistent as far as computing is concerned that a lot of the virtual machines can openly hard drives of different formats. So these are just different formats of hard drives. It's just like zip files. There are slightly different versions of zip files, but most people don't really care about the difference. You just click and unzip. But they may be slight differences. Now, the next part is, this one is important for those who maybe will work with virtual machines in future. There's dynamically allocated and fixed size, right? Dynamically allocated means that unless you are using the space, it will not work. So if I make a virtual hard drive and I don't put anything on it, it could just be 1 kilobyte. So we use as small space as possible. But the moment I start adding things in, it will be like a dynamic array. As I add things, it knows the final size, but as I add things, it will what? You use up more and more space. But if you say you want to use fixed, what it will do is it will immediately allocate the entire space. So if I say 10 gig fixed, it will make a 10 gigabyte file on my hard drive right now. But if I say, okay, let me do this. If I say dynamic, it doesn't matter how large it is, right? So this is saying test. If I say to create it, let me go and find out where the hard drive is. Okay, so I just created a virtual machine called test. I didn't even check to see where the hard drive is going, but maybe that's good. So that we can figure out how to find where the hard drive is. So this is the information about the machine. So it's saying it's Red Hat. That's how much memory. That's the display. Very small display, 12 megabytes. Sometimes, if you are doing with Linux installations, I would advise you to increase the memory a bit and give it a little bit more for the display. Else, you may run into some errors because it's trying to display doesn't have enough memory. So I would increase it, maybe 64 megabytes. Increase it, give it a little bit more. That's your storage. The audio is going through whatever Windows has. It's using my network. You can connect USB. They're also shared folders. So let's edit this. To edit, I'm choosing settings, right? Or maybe you can right click and say, sorry, settings. So there's clone here, remove group, and so on. Start is there, right? But if I start this right now, so let me just start this. It's just like a machine that hasn't been on. We haven't put any OS on it. So it's asking me, do I want to put in some CD, a CD or something? So it's asking. I can say no CD, but well, I was really insisting because okay, please select 4. So you can pick. And right now, some of you have your CentOS copied. So you can find out where your CentOS has been placed. Mine is Z or B. Okay, so well, so I'll just pick one. I think you guys have 7. I'll just pick one. So if I pick it and say start, then what? It means that I am booting almost like I'm booting a real machine. Right? So it's like I plugged it in virtually. Oh no, put up media. Why? Okay. Okay, let me power this off. Okay, settings. That's my storage. It's very interesting that you can do this about 100 times in daily life. You come to class and the day you want to run it, that's the day you want to run it. Okay, let me change the media. Let me change it and pick something else. Remove it. Choose another one. Let me go and find the CentOS 7. Okay, I'm going to pick the 7. This is the one that you guys have. Okay, this is everything. Okay, let me pick. All right, okay, and then start it. Okay, so this is a bootable disk. So not all hard drives are bootable. Or maybe if you made a mistake with the download and the file was corrupted in some way, it will not boot. So when you boot, this is almost like if you picked a real CD, put it into your computer and you're starting. So it's asking me what I like to do. So for you guys, you'll be picking install, but usually there's test. Test is available. For most installations, what I'd advise you do is to test your media before you install. So if there's something wrong with the disk or whichever installer you're using, you can take it out. So I'll just pick this. Right. While this is doing this, I'll go off and do something else. All right. So in your settings, I just picked another machine, right? In your settings, if in future or in this class you run into an issue running a specific operating system, you can go online and ask. And there are many forums, and there are people who are running different OSs. So sometimes you would ask, oh, okay, I'm trying to get Windows 10 to run. What settings should I use? Because aside this, under advanced, okay, this is clipboard, encryption. If you go into system, there are little things. How it's doing its I/O, forgotten what EFI stands for. Okay, let me see. Extended firmware interface. So there are other things that an OS hardware clock processor. There are other things that you may not think are important, right? That may be by default. But it's good that if you pick from the list, so try and pick the settings that will work. But if you run into an issue, it's good to go online and see, oh, if for running this OS, what are the recommended settings in VirtualBox? So that you can make the necessary tweaks. So here, there's almost everything you can do. So hardware virtualization. So some of the processes. So when checked, the virtual machine will try to make use of the host CPU's hardware virtualization extensions. So some of the processes that you have, the way processes usually work is they assume that there's only one OS running on it, right? But some of the CPUs are aware that there could be another OS that's running that's making requests. So that means that it will try and separate the work of one OS from the other. I hope you are understanding the point. Some processes can be made aware that, oh, you are not going to be here, you have 4 cores. You can't just, it's not just Windows that are running on you. It's possible that now and then some Linux instructions will come in or some other OS is coming in. So if that happens, what we'll do is we'll try and separate out the work of one OS from the other. Maybe run one on one core for a while, but make sure that whatever is happening here does not interfere with what? The main OS. So that's why hyper-threading or virtualizing technology is available. So I think Intel used to be the only one doing this, but now I think all of them support this. Right. Paging as well. We will see paging when we get to about chapter 8 or chapter 9 of Silver Charts. It's one of the latter chapters. Right. The next is display. So you can see, as I said, this display I increased it so that I can do more graphics. 12 megabytes. I mean, a megabyte, even a picture, how much is a picture? So if you say 12 megabytes, the whole screen is 12 megabytes. It's a little bit small. So I tend to make it a little bit larger. How many monitors you have is there? 3D acceleration. I haven't tried playing games on this though, but if you enable it, supposedly you pass the instructions for 3D to the actual graphics processor, and you can have your 3D features. And this is storage. So you can realize that in this particular version, I have 2 hard disks. So if you need to, sometimes you can have more than 1 hard disk, just like in your real computer, right? Maybe you have hard disk 1, you can plug in an external. Here as well, you have that feature. And then you can do what you can see, add a hard disk or add a CD, right? So you can add more hard disks if you need. And this one has 2 hard disks. One is a database hard disk, that's 8 gig, and one is the main system hard disk. Solid state. If you are using a solid state drive, it's good. I should have checked this. It's good to check this, right? Because the solid state drives are different from the optical disk drives. For the solid state drives, okay, so the difference that you see in the text, usually when I say storage, some people when they say storage, they mean all of any place where you can store data, right? But when people say memory and storage, that means that memory is that 4 gigabytes. So let me try and find it. Oh, I thought I had memory somewhere. Sorry, system. Mother. Okay. So on the motherboard, when people usually say memory, people just say the term memory. They don't mean the hard disk. They just mean that volatile green, I don't know what to call it, circuit that you slip in to do temporary. So it's temporal. The main power will go away. Right. So when people say memory, that's what they usually mean. This memory. I think it's. Let me see if I can find the PowerPoint. I did try to do snapshots of what memory would normally look like. So that's the memory. That the green one that's slotted in, and it's usually volatile. Of course, there's also some memory that is on, but it's not called memory. Usually they call it cache. The one on the processor. So the processor itself, that Pentium 4 or Pentium dual core, that little chip, that will slot in. Let me see. It's not. I don't have a snapshot here. Let me find. Um, that's my second presentation. Is it? Oh, I thought I had more than that. Just a sec. I was sure I had a snapshot of it. Okay, so this. So if you open the computer, you will find a processor, usually square shaped, plugged in somewhere. So this also has on it some memory that it uses, but the one on this is called the cache, right? And that one you can't change it. If you buy, and that's why sometimes they're expensive. If you are buying a processor, usually the cache, that memory that it keeps on it, it's not something you can change. But the one that you slot in, like this one, that's something that can be changed, can be upgraded. So when they say memory, they just mean this one. And when they say storage, they mean any other thing, like pen drive, hard drive, that you attach. Okay, cool. Okay. All right. So good question. All right. So storage here is separated from memory. So all the things you've attached, like CD drives, hard drives, they are all considered under storage, while the memory is separated out here. Right? I don't tend to use audio a lot. Those some people tend to play music. But if you're playing music, I would say, why don't you play on your main machine? Why are you playing it in the virtual machine? All right. So the network adapter, there are many others that are here. I'll just point out there is bridged. There are many, okay, they have many advantages and disadvantages. I'll leave you to explore if based on the task you're performing. But basically, it's going to have a virtual network card. So that's almost like an Ethernet card. Usually, I just use the NAT. Okay, so what we'll do is it will give it a virtual card, and then whenever you are browsing, it will send the request to your main machine and then forward it on. So within the virtual machine, you can also be what? You can be browsing, downloading, and so on. The bridge mode, I don't use the bridge mode a lot, but for people who are thinking of, I want it to actually use my actual network card, not virtual. That means that it can also get the same IP, perform certain tasks. You can use the bridge mode, but for this class, this one is good. Right? There are serial ports, and these you can enable and then make it control some of your own ports. So those with USB drives, but I think the USB has been separated. But serial port is some computers used to have these. It looks like the one for the VGA. Yeah, these people don't see them anymore, but they are still there. So if you have certain ports, you can enable it and use your virtual to control it. You have your USB. If you want to, you can plug the USB here and it will be passed on to your virtual machine. Shared folders only work when you're trying to share folders between the main, that's the virtual, and the guest. Sorry, the host and the guest. Right. So the guest is this. If we say guest, we mean the one in the virtual machine, and the host is what? Like in this case, my real Windows. Right. I don't use this a lot. Right. I think it's supposed to be customizing, and when the virtual machine is running, the things at the top, but I don't make any changes to it. Okay, so if you install, after you install CentOS, when installing your CentOS, make sure that you pick the development packages. So the development packages are things like a G++, so that you can do your compilation. Some people, what happen is they don't, I would install everything. And you need to have a space to install everything, just so that you can play around with it. That's why you just install everything, have some fun. But at the very least, make sure that if there's a list for development packages, you pick the development package. Sorry, let me see if mine is running. Okay, so mine is running. I'll not install for real. I'll just pick a few things. So, oh, come on. All right, so it's right now. My mouse is trapped within the OS. This can be frustrating for some people, but just know that for most of the virtual machines that are there, what they do is when you click inside the virtual, they'll capture the mouse. It means that it now has control. The OS is sending all mouse activity, and I can't seem to get out. But for VirtualBox and VMware, it's a combination between Control and Alt. So if you forget, just one of the controls or Alt should get you out. If by hitting Control, I can swap out of it. So you see, I can go off screen, but if I hit, it becomes black. That means I'm in the virtual machine. Control picks me out. I think it's the right control. Okay, so I can pick the language. Okay, am I backwards? Did I get okay? So I'm switching in and out. Just okay. Sorry, it's like there's one that is on the outside and one that's on the inside. Okay. So space and time, language support, installation store, destination. So for destination, usually I don't make any changes. You just pick the hard drive. If you are installing on a real machine, it's good just to pay attention to some of the things. Right. In this class, please know that some of these are just for making sure that you can do this. It's not like you just read it somewhere. You can do something. That's why I'm going through this. I'm at the same time recording, and I'll see if when I process it, the voice and audio works out. Like usually I should be talking down so it works out. Okay. So you can, if you have a real machine and you are installing, you have multiple hard disks. Maybe if you are hired by a chassis or some company, there may be a machine with multiple hard disks. So don't just go and pick any hard disk. Usually you have to find out which hard disk are you installing. For this it's just one, so that's cool. But it's easy to go and wipe out someone's data because there are some companies where maybe if you go, there's a hard disk for the OS, a hard disk for the database, hard disk, many of them. So make sure that you check, find out which is which before you get started installing. Right. So your hard disk is there. Software selection. Right. Under software selection, you can pick the things you want to install. All of them have some combination of this. Right. So there's minimal infrastructure. So depending on even what you're using it for. So you realize that the tasks that are performed by the IT department and so on, that means when you're installing an OS, they can pick and say, oh, I want this to be what? Maybe a DNS server, backup server, direct email server. You can pick, and depending on what you pick, it will select the necessary packages to run the machine as that type. I people are understanding. People are bored, sleepy. Don't worry, quiz will come and will ginger you up soon. It's already written. I'm just going through this to make sure everyone is fine. Okay, so you realize that there are all the different types of systems, different types of servers that you can have. They are all available. So I tend to just, if you have a full version, pick the best one for your needs. Since you guys are just more or less doing for development, you can pick between one of, oh, this is also a nice one, sorry. Just pointing it out. That there are some machines. I wouldn't advise you to do a virtual within a virtual. You can do it, but I don't know why you would, right? But sometimes there are, I think maybe she may set up something like that. So we'll ask her, right? So there are some places where people are working on virtual machines, and what will happen is the main machine that will host the others, he will be a virtualization host. That means that he will be designed such that he will allow you to install virtual boxes on him. So if you had a real machine and you wanted to set it up to do this VirtualBox business, you pick virtualization host. That means when he installs, you have all the capabilities. You put in software to allow installing virtual machines very quickly, right? You also have server with user interface, basic web server. I think this semester you've been hearing a lot of print server. Somewhere on campus, there's a print server that is receiving your requests. So that one is there as well, right? But most people pick the GNOME desktop. So there are two main, okay, I won't say two because there are so many of them. It's like I'm advertising for one without the other. There are many desktops. In Windows, you'll be given by Microsoft and told this is what you're using. Usually 2 or 3 versions, this is what you're using. I think the same applies to Mac, the same applies to Android. But for the Linux, it's a little bit separated. You can run the core system and change the front end to something else if you want. So this is the GNOME desktop. It's the most, well, I don't want to be advertising for people, right? So GNOME seems to be very common, right? KDE is as well. KDE has a little bit of a Windows look, though they claim they are not Windows. I'm being required, I have to be careful. Okay. So GNOME desktop is fine. You would see GNOME a lot, right? But some people also like KDE. I used to be in this group, the KDE group. I used to be there for a long time. But I've seen some people using GNOME, so I do say take a look at GNOME as well. So if you pick GNOME, you'd realize you have, sorry, I'm getting here. Oh, why isn't this thing making me happy? Okay. Right. All of the features, so there's backup, so GNOME applications, internet applications, if you are doing email chats, development tools. Remember I was saying add the development tools. If you add the development tools, it should contain things like the compilers, Java, and so on. Right. So if you are practicing doing something, I will. But as I said, you can pick everything here. Office is things like OpenOffice or LibreOffice. I don't know what's currently in the pack. Remote desktop, so you can connect to others. You don't need smart card. You can add legacy X Windows. We are not really doing a lot of backup, but you could add backup plans. Right. There's also this one because they realized a lot of people were sort of using this for development. You also have workstation for software, hardware, all the development. This can also work as well. So any of them. So either you pick a known desktop or development. Okay. So development, that means everything is in there. Put in. So this is like someone who is developing software. Well, not saying that what you're doing is not software development, but some people do a little bit more. So you realize there are things like graphical creation, hardware monitoring, identity management, a lot. There should be a development package here as well. Platform development. So those who are developing. So if you want to do a project related to operating systems, and you may want to configure or do something new as far as the OS is concerned, then maybe you pick one of these, pick platform development, so that it will have all the necessary libraries, maybe create a kernel, create file system. So all of those should be there. Right. So even other technical writing, they have really done well with this part. At first, it wasn't here. Now they made a whole. So anybody, but I would say pick no and pick a development path. All right, I'm not going to install for real. This is the end of my is it installation part. So if there are any questions about the installation part, I'll take questions. I'll run a real virtual machine. I'm not installing. I'm already installed. I'm just stopping here to take questions. Right, so are there any questions? Yeah. So we are going to be using CentOS. Right. Oh, so this is the installation process. Right. So if you are installing, just so as a summary, you can make a new. Oh, sorry. Power off. So in summary, make a new machine. But when you make a new machine and you fill it in, when you finish, make sure that when you go to settings, you select go to settings. And for the storage, this is your virtual CD. Under storage, go and pick the CentOS. Go and choose the CentOS that you have. Right. Let's at least wrap up the thing for today, and then we'll go around helping people get things to. All right. So I'll run just calling it. Right. So some of the activity for this week, a lot of activity in this class will be done by yourself because there's so much excitement happening. You can't contain it in this classroom. You have to take it home with you to your bed, the bathroom, the kitchen, to the library. Boys and girls, so someone is asking, how come there are different types of operating systems or even virtual machines for different tasks? Like maybe you are doing security tests. So what happens is even for CentOS, right, there are different groups who put together packages that will have certain installations. So you realize when I was installing, I said you can pick it as a server, you can pick it as a development. So depending on which one you pick, they'll put the necessary packages on it. So the robotics people, you have a special type of OS that you're using that contains all the robotics libraries and how to control the robot machine. Right. So people put together these packages for different tasks. And that's why sometimes for a company or for some tasks, they'll tell you, go and install this version of OS. Even CentOS, there'll be different flavors. Right? There'll be live desk, live security desk, many of them, robotics, design, office package, penetration test. So depending, someone will put together all the packages on the CD so that when you install, it's very easy to do. Right. The one I have here is called Everything, and it allows you to click all the packages, everything. There are some of them where they'll say minimal. Minimal is the very smallest. It will be about maybe 300 megabytes. But this one is about, I don't know, 6. I downloaded the biggest thing I could find so that people could have fun, right? So you can pick, install, try something else. So this is just the shell. Okay, the question.
There's something about Windows, legacy Windows.
Okay, so if you see anything like legacies, that just means that when the OS is being developed, just as for normal Windows or Mac, there are some libraries and some interfaces that were a little bit older. But sometimes they provide those in case someone needs to do things with older software. So if you see legacy, it often means that, oh, there's something that may be needed from the past. Right? So that means it's almost like a compatibility stick supporting older library calls. Right? Okay, so this is just Linux, the shell. Yes, you can have Android. You can have everything. Almost any OS. The only ones that I've not seen around are maybe the Nokia Symbian, but I'm sure it's possible. But the only reason is maybe the Symbian. Sometimes there's an emulator. If there's an emulator, nobody will waste their time trying to make maybe a virtual machine for it. Yes, they go and use the emulator. But for Android, it does exist. Yes, you will find. So please know that even for CentOS, there will be a version that is designed for real-time operating system. Right. So all of them, when you are picking something like even Windows, so if you pick Windows 10, there will be something that would, okay, so Windows 2012, the server looks a lot like Windows 7, but except that there will be some components. That's why they charge different rates for different things. The home is different from the, I don't know, home, professional, ultimate. They are all these levels. And then there's server. Often, if you say server, that means that the machine knows that he's connecting to many people. He knows he's doing a lot of work. He knows that's why you realize when I picked 2012 server, it went almost up to like 2 gig RAM immediately because it's like that's my job. My job is I'm dealing with a lot of work, right? So depending, you can have even under Windows. There are different types of Windows that you are not seeing on the market. Right? I'm sure somewhere there's maybe some installation where someone is using Windows to maybe fly a plane or something. Well, but don't use Windows to fly a plane. I'm sure you talk to them if you want to use Windows to fly a plane. The same for Mac. They also give that warning that for some operating systems, it may not be for real-time systems. Right? So real-time means maybe flying a plane is going to crash. Maybe that's the time when it decides it's going to do an update. Right? So if you say real-time, they will put certain software in place, move certain things to make sure that it functions based on the parameters of what real-time means. Is it 1 minute to respond, 50 seconds, 1 second? Someone will change the code to make it behave the way you want. Okay, so this is just basic Linux. Please, when installing, you don't have to make, since you're just learning in class, you don't have to make the most complex password. Some people want to make a password 60 characters and all the letters in the alphabet. But you don't need that. And when you're working, you can do that. But right now, this semester, we are just exploring the system. So as much as possible, don't pick a password when maybe the day before you forget your password and then you're trying to figure out how do I get it. There are ways to do it, but they've made it harder and harder to get into a system, especially if you say, oh, encrypt it, do this. You can add all the layers, but since you are just learning, we are not really building proprietary material here. You can choose a very simple password that you can remember. Right. Okay, so in Linux, so Windows has the task manager, right? I'll be putting up a Linux, it's almost like an online test, but I've downloaded it so that you can run on your own once you have it. And throughout this week, I don't know if I should have the class on Wednesday because there has to be some time for it to go through a lot of commands, right? So you will have to learn how to use the command shell. I know there's a graphical interface, right? But it's also good to learn how to use the command shell. Why is it good to know how to do the command shell? Anybody, whether for internship or their personal experience, why would we ever need to learn commands? Okay. All right, so that's a very good point. That the command prompt, all of the things that you are seeing, so it's just like a normal a normal developer, when you're developing something, usually you start with what? The source code. You write your code, you compile. And then people, so OS, how it develops is people realize, oh, there's something like copying. Instead of telling people to write C++ code to copy from one file to another, let us make this small program where you type the name or you drag and you move, right? And so there are a lot of things in command prompts that are available that are in the UI. Of course, the nice UI with all the graphics is one of the nicest things, drag, drop, click, click. But sometimes, as you pointed out, what if all that extra fancy, something has happened to it? You will have to what? Revert back to command prompt to get some things done. Things like formatting, how many bits do I have? Right. A lot of things you can get quickly on command prompt. Tell me how many disks you have. What is your IP? A lot of things. Okay, so someone else had another contribution.
I'm trying to wait to say that we have graphical interface.
Okay, so he's saying for a lot of server rooms, when you go into servers a lot, people may not have graphical interfaces for you. Why would we have graphical interfaces for you as our priority in the server room? Yeah. So in the server condition, we really don't care about whether or not you can do spinning 360 window, right? Because someone is checking their email. What he wants is he wants the email text to come to his phone. He's not really going to say, well, I heard that you guys have the latest user interface and you are swiping right to left and up and down. They don't care. They just want to say, I clicked my mail, I got my response. So for a lot of times, the server software, server OSs will not have a lot in terms of graphics, right? It won't have all the rounded edges and so on. You can install them, there's nothing to stop you. But it's taking space, it's taking resources, right? So often they will not be there. And a lot of them will just go bare bones. So I think the core shell machine, there's no user interface. It's all bare bones. You can work in your graphical environment, but when the code moves over, it's just bare bones. We don't put in anything extra. Because when people are saying, oh, the machine is slow, that extra graphics you're adding for someone to have some fancy on the server is not going to benefit the hundreds of users that are connected. Right. So why else would we use command prompt? Yeah, so I think if you understand all the command prompts, right, all the commands that are available, yes, you do have a better understanding of the system. Because of all the things that are there, it is just that the people who would then learn the commands or learn the system calls will make nice interface so that you can use. So as an operating system student, I expect that you take an interest in the back end, not just the front end, not just be an end user. Right? So Android is a very good example. A lot of people are rooting their phones. And when they root their phones, unless you're just rooting it just because you heard rooting is cool, so you're like, I have a rooted phone, I want to be cool. But some people root it for some purpose. Maybe you want to run a server on it. Maybe you want to run it as a DNS. Maybe you want to have multiple users. I'm not encouraging you to go and root your phone. If you root your phone, you void your warranty. Okay. So you may have a legitimate reason for rooting the phone, but what happens is once the phone is rooted, then there are other features that people can add to it and say, oh, now the phone can behave in this way. That wasn't standard. That means that someone has gone to learn the system calls, put it in code, and then is offering you that feature. So you realize that for a lot of devices that we say are rooted, you realize there could be some extra thing the person is doing that a normal phone does not do, such as so KitKat, I think Android 4.4, I think 4.3, up to that point, you could write to the SD card. It's something I encountered. And then after the update, you can't write to your SD card anymore. Every program has to write to their own folder, the folder they installed to. It's good for security. But then for some people who were doing a lot of other processing, with like mixing things, wrote their own scripts, then you cause an issue because that means that they can't say, oh, go and copy this from WhatsApp, go and post on the website, go and copy this. Now they have to either write different applications to communicate or find some way, and it wasn't easy. So a lot of people say routing just so that they can get these extra scripts to work, right? And so routing, or not just routing, but knowing the extra commands does give you more abilities, right? And that's the same way that you can have Linux, but there can be different flavors. So you can have Android. So you realize this is not another for Samsung, but you realize that Samsung, for example, they have this pen thing attached, and it behaves slightly different from all the other Androids. The Samsungs used to have even multiple windows for a long time before the others caught on. Right? Not that they didn't catch on, but there are resource issues. But someone who knows how the OS works would say, okay, if I do this and do this, now I can have multiple windows on the screen. But at first, when it started, all the Androids tended to do one window on the screen, one window on the screen. And then there's people at Samsung, somehow maybe they figured some things out. Maybe added more memory, figured out how do we get two programs to run. I don't know if that's standard now, if all of them can do multiple windows. Still not standard. Yeah, that's one. Okay, maybe that's good for some people, but some people want multiple windows. Right. So that means if you know the OS, what? Then you can implement the feature that you want. Right. I know all of you will not necessarily do OS programming, but it's good to know. Right. Any other reason why command prompt is good? Pure text. All right. So if you know exactly the commands that are there, you can have better control of the OS. Right? Because there are a lot of things that the UI doesn't have everything. Even copying, yeah, maybe there are different types of copy. But as far as most of you just do drag and drop. But maybe if you need the actual copy command, all the options that are available, maybe there's copy with overwriting, copy not overwriting. There are a lot of things that you can do. Right? And in addition, if you know the command, there's what we call scripts. So let me go to, let me see if I can find one of not cache. Let's bash RC. All right. No, that's a boring. Okay, but it's an interesting trick anyway. So this file that's being displayed now, it says that alias rm that's removed is rm-i. That means make all removes interactive. Alias cp-i, make all copies interactive, make all moves interactive. So just by a small script, it's able to at least try and protect users from accidentally deleting everything. So when it's copying, it'll ask you, do you want to copy? So this is something that in a small script. So if you know the commands, that means all the things that the OS is doing can be done in command form. Right? So you don't have to keep clicking. I know clicking is nice, but if you have about 100 commands and you are, so someone came to my office asking me, well, I want to do this in script. I'm like, yeah, it's a good idea because you can type out all the commands. Not that every time they tell you do the task and then you go and sit down, big boss, start clicking. I click, right click, click, enter, paste, copy, move. That's mental approach to things. It's good, it's beautiful, but I'm saying it can take a lot of time. It's better to say what? There's a script, click it, it will do all the things that are necessary. Maybe you are backing up things. You can just have a simple command, copy from here to here, zip it, copy here to here, zip it. There are things that you can do with one click instead of what? I know user interfaces are nice, but as an administrator, if you know the commands, you can type them out into a file, and that file, once clicked, can what? Run all the commands. So knowing the commands, you can do much more, right? So any other thing? Yeah, I'm sure it does, but it's not one of my. I don't know. I'm not really feeling a lot of the classrooms make you feel like a hacker. But it's good if you feel like you can do something. Not hacker in a bad way. I mean, a good, an ethical hacker. Right. So you feel you understand what's going on. Okay, so that's a very good point. That for the terminal, so what you see is within this, when you install CentOS, for security purposes, you realize the more things you have on top of your system, the more security issues you can have. Right? So if I am running as an administrative user, and okay, let me just do that one. Let me do start XFC. Oh. Okay, so as I said, you can have many user interfaces. The one I'm using is called XFCE. It looks like Windows, but it's very light. It doesn't do a lot of fancy things. But I can get a few things done. So what it will do is, if you try and run something graphical, let me see if it would. Okay, so sometimes it will warn you. This one is not giving a warning, but anytime that you're doing something graphical, so you need to consider all the code that is taken to generate this thing. It's more likely that there can be some error or some bug that someone can take advantage of. Right? So security wise, that's why often when you install an OS, it'll tell you don't install something if you don't need. We are learning, so for this one you can't install. But I mean, in the workplace, that's why sometimes you go and you say, "Oh, why don't you install this?" The less things that are installed, the more secure it's going to be. Right? Not saying that you say, "Oh, why didn't you install antivirus?" Because the less things are installed, the more. No, I mean, maybe. So for a lot of server systems, we wouldn't encourage people to go and install all the browsers and all the versions of Flash and all the versions of plugins, all the audio. No, we just say, oh, what is the bare minimum? You want to check? Let's install one browser. Let's make sure that's up to date. That's it, right? Don't say, oh well, I want to install Chrome and I want to install Firefox and I want to install Opera. For everything that you add in, that means the security update that has to be patched. You have more potential holes. Are people understanding that point? Right. So that means that for somebody who is doing this, I would say, well, if there is something that's already in the OS, maybe, well, Emacs is one that tends to come along. So this is a text version of that program, just running in terminal. I'm not using a lot of external resources. So often for the server people or people who are doing secure things, they would not want to add in all the extra things because the more things you add, someone made that program, anything could be in there. But of course, OS, I don't want to say open source is better than closed source or closed source is better than open source. But whichever OS you are using, make sure that you are on top of things as far as security. Don't just go and install and then what you turn your back. You are not, because every day, the same way that it's your job to make the system work, someone too, that's their career. Their career is to steal your passwords, take systems down. That's his job. So every morning when he wakes up, that's the first thing he does. What's the new way to hack? What's the new way to break in? What's the new? So you must what? Be on top of things, whichever OS you install. All right. The last one I'll add to the terminal. People maybe people are not working that way, but one of the nice things about terminal is you will be able to. You realize you're just typing commands, right? So it means that when you connect to another machine, within one line, you can tell it to do something, as opposed to you have to log in, you have to get the whole graphics interface, you have to click before you get something done. So for a lot of things, so if they say, oh, maybe the culture machine, something happened, the database stopped, you should be able to get in quickly. Don't need to have to tell me, oh, well, I need to be in a Vodafone cafe and I need to have 1 megabyte up, 1 megabyte down. You don't need that heavy resource. If it's just text based, you can do it over even dial-up, something very low, because it's just a few characters to achieve the command you want. Right? And you can also save a lot of money on, I don't know, is it internet bundles by doing that? Because anytime, imagine if this whole screen had to go over the network, and I'm doing remote desktop, it does what? It drains you a lot, takes a lot of resources, but you can just use a few commands. You connect, you type the command, enter, shut down, restart, start the database, start the server. All right. So that is it for the VirtualBox, right? So I'm going to put up a book, what's it called, an ebook that will take you through the commands, and we'll be focusing on the first 3 chapters, and that will be helping with chapter 2. The next section of the textbook will talk about processes, as what is a process, what does it do, and it's good to at least practice. So, for example, to know, okay, I can list the different processes that are there. I can see all the extra ones. I know what the process ID is, how much memory, what's the CPU. So just to get some feel, question. So a process can be considered as a task, right? Or a set of instructions that can run. But the term process has been shifting for a while now. Some people can say a program is a process, but I know that maybe, what's the best way? A process would be some context with running code which controls a block of memory. And that means that I can separate one process from another, because if you can't access that memory block, then it means you are not part of that process. You can call them processes, yes, because everybody is running in its own context. So a process has to, as far as what is concerned, run within its own context, have a memory block and some resources that are assigned. And only, so for example, if so a process is just a specific job, like this one, bash is a job, he has a number, right? But within job, there will be other subparts which we call threads. But right now, a process for us is just some specific executing context that has memory and resources assigned. But that definition also gets a little bit hairy because there are some commands which can allow two processes to share the same state. So then, right. Okay, so I know we are almost out of, yeah. How much time do we have? Okay. All right. So on Wednesday, first thing we'll do the quiz, and then make sure you finish this installation. The pen drives are going around. Hey, what are the pen drives? There are two pen drives. There are two pen drives. Please don't take it home as a gift to your special gift. Make sure it comes back to you.
So have you made a new like